Oh, there it is. Hey, chat. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another real good stream. Uh, I am your most of the time host, not Dr. Bob Meiskins. And this week we have another interview stream. Before we jump into that, don't forget that the window to apply to be a judge for the Scary Tapes writing competition is open right now. So you have interest in that. If you've been waiting to hear about that, if you don't know what Scary Tapes is, there's more information, realgoodai.org/scarytapes. But if you want to help, you could definitely use it. But anyway, plugs aside, today we have another guest who has very generously offered to share their time with us and has some very interesting perspective that I think is pretty far outside of the expertise that we have within Real Good. So it's going to be a fantastic conversation. We're joined by Real Good staff members, Dr. Imen and Dr. Maylene. But also joined by our very special guest, Donata Bohanec, who is the Executive Director of the California Elder Justice Coalition. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, talking about her career, her experience, and the intersection of AI with her work and her organization. So anyway, Donata, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you sharing your time so generously. I'm sure you're a very busy person with very important things to be doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And also, ooh, that's the wrong scene. There's your faces.
Where are we?
You're right there.
Okay. Yeah,
so take it away. Amen.
Okay, so hello, Donata. I wanted to start by kind of like, if you can glimpse a little bit on your like career and education first, because I know you studied anthropology and then you're working for nonprofit for elderly justice. How the connection and what made you choose anthropology, and then what made you go into elderly justice?
Okay, so I get to go back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I think reflecting on college years can be kind of fun, to be honest. Yes, I did get my bachelor's in anthropology, and my interest in studying anthropology was always around how do we as humans, interrelate? How do we build society? How do we think about one another in terms of what's considered our society versus another society? And it just really led to a certain curiosity that has just been my way of thinking about the world, I guess. And so in reality, it's not directly connected, except that when you're studying how society is constructed and how do we fix societal problems, then you start to see the human element behind it. So I certainly still think as an anthropologist, even when I'm running programs that are in the nonprofit sector, but a lot of the work that I have ended up doing has been around how does the public sector, kind of work to alleviate some of the societal ills that we see. And certainly elder justice and elder abuse prevention and response is one of those areas that, I think there's a saying that, how society treats its most vulnerable really speaks to how that society actually thinks and works. And I don't have the exact quote, or I think it's a philosopher that said it at some point. But certainly when it comes to how we treat our elders, you really look at a society and say, we could really do a better job of this. And when we look at other examples from around the world, there are places that are doing a better job. And, here we are in America with all these huge machinery of government set up that, if we can't figure out how to support people in aging, what's the end goal here anyway? And I did get my master's in public administration along the way too. So that gave me kind of that program management lens that I've always operated from in the nonprofit world.
So actually you are the second anthropologist that we have on our stream. The first anthropologist, she had a very interesting career of like transitioning from studying Mongolian people in mines, I think, to transition to UX experience in tech companies. And she was like, it was a very interesting discussion about like how do we improve the human experience on these different AI tools by her experience of like how human works in the from the anthropology side. And you took kind of like a different route, which is the nonprofits. And quickly, can you tell us more about what is the California Elder Justice Coalition and what do they do?
Sure. So the California Elder Justice Coalition is a statewide advocacy organization here in California. We have, I think there's 18 states that have their own elder justice coalitions, and then we do have a national, a federal elder justice coalition as well in our country. And we have local ones too. So I actually came to this work from facilitating my own county's elder justice initiative, and then took this role on the state level. And so the idea behind an elder justice coalition, while the justice movements of late have been around, whether it's racial justice or environmental justice, there's a lot of kind of newer justice movements that have grown in the past few years. Elder justice is actually more taking a step back and kind of looking at that long trajectory of how do we support aging in our country, in our state, in our communities, where people are able to have the supports that they need to age with dignity and independence, and kind of how they would want to age, right? How do we build in the supports from a public infrastructure, from the personal side of things, where people are able to exercise their rights into their elder years, free from harm, but also with the supports that are needed so that we can maintain the type of aging that we would want. And so it's the justice kind of lens isn't just from a societal justice issue. It's really that kind of like from a human rights perspective. Like, if we can't age with dignity, then what are we doing all this work for in the first place? It really is about that lens of human rights and into our older years.
And how are we doing that?
How are we doing? Well, we got a lot to talk about. I mean, I think that, the one benefit of working in this sphere of aging is that we all know somebody, we all care about somebody,
and we will be them at some point.
And then we will be them, and we're going to want people to care about us.
Exactly.
So I think that piece is when I say elder justice, everybody says, oh, let me tell you about my grandma. Let me tell you about my auntie. And when we think of someone dear to us and the challenges they're facing, and then when we think of our own older years, there's a common desire to want to do better. And I think that that's the piece that I really enjoy about being in the elder justice sphere.
Yeah, no, for sure. What's the focus on the elderly justice? Like, what are the challenging things, the most important things that like you have to kind of like help with?
Yeah, I think it changes over the years. I think the fact that California has invested in our aging, we have a master plan for aging in our state. We have our Department of Aging.
Plan for aging. What does it mean?
Sure. So California has taken the time and effort to sit down and say, and kind of answer this question of how are we doing with aging in California, and looking at things like, housing, economic security, access to health care. These are key components that our master plan for aging in the state of California has pulled apart. And so there's 5 main areas that we need to look at. And in those, there's, literally over 300 initiatives this was drafted back in 2020. And so California as a state does have a plan and does have, kind of a tracker where they're looking at how we're doing in certain areas. And I would say that is, it's a great place to start. But elder justice and the work of my coalition and this advocacy is actually looking at what pieces fall through those holes.
For example,
while the master plan or the
can you give a specific example?
Sure. So some of the things that I've been talking about recently and that kind of relate to this topic of AI, I was able to testify at our Little Hoover Commission in the fall, speaking about how scams and transnational fraud really are devastating Californians of a lifetime of savings. We all know that, but yet there isn't a common agenda about what we can do to fix that problem. And so the idea
Don't
that
answer the phone.
Well, not answering the phone would be a start, but certainly the scammers are coming at us in a variety of directions, and they're using the technological tools to access people. And I think part of it is that it's aimed at all of us, but I would say that from the elder perspective, or from what our older adults experience, is if I'm already not as familiar with the technology, or I'm just trying to get on WhatsApp to talk to my grandkids, then a scammer comes at me on an already new technology, then it's going to be a lot easier for me to get lost in a conversation with someone whom I don't know. We've even seen it with text messages directly. Someone can call you from any kind of spoofed phone number. I've had a call come from my own phone number. So,
Oh,
they can call from what looks like your doctor's office or your local police department, and it shows up and says, this is the police department calling. One of the ones that I thought really had the potential of catching people is someone calling from a vet's office, like a veterinarian, and said your
mm,
pet's appointment needed to be rescheduled today because the doctor's home sick. And then, the respondent would say, "Oh, you have the wrong number." But just the act of getting involved in that conversation, now the person is on the line, and because it has to do with pets, like
mm,
it touches on a very, like, where a point where someone really cares, and they're like, "Oh, I want to, clarify. Oh, you got the wrong number, so you got to call the right person and make sure they know their pet appointment's rescheduled." And
mm,
it gives them the reason to engage in the first place. And I think that that's one of the areas where you know, you're not always thinking that someone is coming out to get you. And so you're responding to a text message, and then all of a sudden, you are in conversation with what would be a scammer, and they're getting to know you, and they're getting to know where your touch points are that they can ask for money, really.
yeah, we've done actually some advocating talks actually to an elderly community. I think Dr. Eric did that once with slides to kind of like explain what are the dangers of AI and kind of like, literacy, give them AI literacy about around that. And yeah, this is something that is so you're
Yeah,
saying like basically there's not a national state level plan on like prevention of this like
exactly.
AI scams that can kind of like ruin your life.
Yeah, so if you pick
Elderly?
apart this area of the scam, so this is an area we asked what are some of the topics that we're working on. This is one that's just so rife. It's billions and billions of dollars in losses. And the government does have the mechanisms to stop people from losing their life savings, but there hasn't been a unified desire to put that kind of control on people's accounts, right? You can't stop someone from accessing their money, according to our government at the moment. But yet this devastating loss then catapults someone into needing extra support. They could be losing their home because of it. Obviously, losing their retirement would mean that then now they're eligible for public benefits. I mean, the responsibility is there, but it isn't directed at a singular. It can't just be directed at one area. It's a variety. And so I think that with this scam issue, if someone is a victim of a scam and calls their local law enforcement, they're going to get one response. So they can call APS. They're going to maybe get some support, somebody to talk to. It's not really clear where to go or what to do in that moment if that's what someone's experiencing. And so I think that that's really an area where, a coalition mindset of, bringing all of the partners to the table and saying, here's what we want banks to be able to do to stop this, this bleeding of funds, and have the FBI and the police departments all on the same page about how to respond. We need that level of unified
Mm,
direction. And while individuals might say, oh, this is what needs to happen, or here's a little number to call, that's not going to get someone through the right door in the vast majority of cases. And so the fact that there isn't a singular message, direction, here's what to do, here's how to
mhm,
stop this. And we can't educate our way out of it. Like, the prevention and outreach is great, but that's not stopping these transactions from taking place. It might help some of us who become more knowledgeable, but it's not stopping the
mm,
dollars from leaving the accounts. And if it didn't make billions of dollars, the scammers would be moving on to other crimes. But this is certainly, padding
mm.
their
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pocketbooks to just
Did
an
did you
umpteenth degree.
did you see like an evolution of the type of abuse that was the elderly was victim of? Like, it's did you see like a change from like from physical or emotional or neglect to more like financial abuse more and more with the rise of AI and all this scam thing? Or it's kind of is part of the general one? Like, I guess, what is the most oppressing abuse that you deal with from an elderly? Just
Yeah, so physical things that take place in person, that's some, a family member, that's somebody those are taking place. It's almost like they're two different worlds, right? Versus somebody that's overseas, transnational
mm,
crime.
mhm,
That those are two different beasts. Now, the transnational crimes, those are increasing exponentially every year. The FBI does a great job of tracking what is reported, talking about, for example, I think one of the areas that the FBI has noted is still on the rise is like the business email compromise, where a business will have their whole email system hacked, send out a bunch of invoices to everybody who's ever interacted with an entity, and those people end up paying. Like, that's one that the FBI is able to say, like, this is a real problem. It's like 20% of the fraud that they report on an annual basis. So, that's kind of like on the big level, right? The
mm,
global level. In your community, people are experiencing elder abuse. Talking about any type of abuse, is really what will get people to ask for help, to reach out when they're concerned for a loved one or for themselves. And so I think we're still in this mindset of we've got to get more people comfortable with saying, hey, I need help. This isn't good. My nephew's moved in and, is taking over my house and not giving me enough food to eat, and I don't know what to do. Like, you need, with anything to do with abuse prevention and response, people need to feel comfortable that someone can help them and that they can speak up and say what's happening. So
mhm.
they're just two very different fields. While
Yeah.
APS will collect that, Adult Protective Services will collect that information, and there might be a social worker that can respond, you're not really, they're just not the same type of crime. And I think that that's also part of the challenge in our system, is that our police departments want to go out and get a criminal, like they want to go get the bad guy and arrest him. And if it's coming through a phone, they're like, what can I do about that? And so it's also like our system is set up where that's how police would respond, but that's not the type of crime that's coming at us right now. So
I see.
there's I think a big difference in separating those two. And yet, if you're aging in our state and you're experiencing, the fraud, and then it's gonna threaten your housing, that becomes then a local problem too. So it's kind of both
I
and, I
see.
guess.
And does your coalition kind of overview all of these ones, or like there's a specific thing that you are like more
Sure.
focused on?
Yeah, so I think that it changes depending on the time. So right now there are discussions on the state level about what can we do about frauds and scams, and the California Elder Justice Coalition has, drafted kind of some suggestions, some responses, what can we be doing? And now the state is unifying. They have this they are unifying some of the state structure so that it can better respond. Okay. So that's an advocacy area that our coalition can weigh in on. We can respond to what is happening and say, hey, don't forget about the victims. It's great to do more to support law enforcement when they get these reports, but what are we doing to help the person who's lost their life savings? That's an area where our coalition
Yeah,
will
that's true. Like,
talking
what do
about
you do?
victims. Like, what do you do to support after someone's lost everything? You can't get the money back in most cases, but that person still needs help. Like, it's a devastating feeling that they're left with, and a system that doesn't really respond to them.
Mm.
So that would
What?
be one area we continue to advocate for, is like, what are people experiencing after all this has happened? So with any coalition, we certainly look at what the times are leading to. So I think, talking about, I think people are really quick to say that AI might make these scams worse, but the scams are all, like, they're already attacking us, with the ability to make, tens of thousands of calls in a minute, to any number that will pick up. The dark web is tracking people's, information. Like, this is already happening. What would AI do that would make it worse? Well, it would maybe generate more calls, but that's already happening. So I think that that's an area where it's like we still need to be thinking about the people in our community. How do we help them? How do we stop these? Like, how do we build a barrier things like that that might make a difference in an individual's life.
I have a question. You mentioned maybe in the previous question something to the effect of we I don't know if it was the government or like us as a society already have the ability to like stop what's happening, but we're just not unified and able to stop. Could you, maybe I misinterpreted that or misunderstood, could you elaborate on that? Like what are the actionable things? You mentioned some of them, like having a centralized place to call instead of this disjointed trying to figure out who to even call. But could you talk maybe a little bit more about like what could we actually do? What could our government do? Governments in like what are the practical, actionable, unified things that we could do to stop these problems? And what did you mean by stop them? Like stop the scammers completely? And how do we do that?
Wouldn't that be nice? We got to make it so hard they can't do it, and that the consequences are so high that they're no longer seeing us as their, spending account. So I am not a financial expert in the behind the scenes of how banks operate, but the example that I give is it's like, you picture the red button, like can someone just push a red button? And I think it came up best when we talk about something as awful as like child pornography, right? Like it when you see it, that someone's being scammed. You can stop that transaction, but yet we don't do that for someone losing their life savings. So if we're doing it for something as awful on the internet as that, so there's a way to stop these transactions from happening. And if you think of like the times of the America past 9/11, like we were able to stop terrorist organizations from sending money to each other. How come we can't stop these transnational networks from taking these billions of dollars from Americans? And so for me, I get the fortunate position of being on the outside of the financial system and saying, if you can stop it for those awful crimes, how can we not do it for this? And so it is a matter of, I think, from a policy perspective, looking in the mirror as a society and saying, are we willing to tell Susan Jones that she cannot withdraw $40,000 from her bank right now and stop that transaction from happening? And if we are willing to do it for other issues that are more heinous, how come we can't do it for these transnational scams that are causing this devastating loss? And we know that it is all psychological tactics that they're using. The amount of convinced that a victim, how convinced that victim is when they are withdrawing their funds, they will say and do anything because that scammer has them on the hook, and they feel like they're in whatever way they feel unable to change direction to stop that scam from taking place, even if they know that that's what's happening. And so all the psychological tactics that scammer's using, a bank teller sitting across from Susan says, I know this is a scam, but she's insisting on withdrawing her money. But yet if it was something for a terrorist organization or, child pornography, you would stop it. So why don't we have those tools in place for this? And that's why I say it's the public policy mirror. At what level can we step in and say someone doesn't have the right to take their money out of their account and give it away? And we have, as a society, have not crossed that road of when do we take someone's rights away on that level. So you become an adult when you turn 18. Nobody takes that level of independence from you when you turn 88 or 98 or 108. It doesn't matter. The age isn't the number, isn't the problem. It's when do we interfere in a way that is, frankly, un-American.
Well, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
The chat has a question. Well, actually, chat has a perspective, but I want to pose this as a question because I'm curious what you would have to say. Minimal grammar in chat is, and I'm sure this is a common thing that you hear. They have a couple messages and they're essentially saying like, I can't imagine why hearing a voice of a family member, how that leads to someone giving away their life savings. Like that sort of argument of like, well, are these people who are getting scammed just suckers then? Or why does this work? And I think people, one, these are people. It's not like this is some I know it's a stranger to you, but they are people. This is a pretty harsh take. But in your work, in your experience, Donata, like, I mean, how does that? Are all the ones who are getting scammed just I don't know, just suckers? Are they just idiots? Like, or this happens to a lot of people. I don't think all of those people fall into that category. But what is your experience, I guess, and what do you say? Because I'm sure you hear this a lot
Yeah,
from a lot of people.
absolutely. You know, we're all, we're humans walking around with the brain that's somewhat wired similarly. Yeah, it's a little different. And the tactics used are they're using psychological tactics. And so the best example that I've been able to give when I speak to groups, for example, is that right now you're asking that question from a part of your brain that's full of reason and judgment, and you're in a calm state. You're sitting at your computer or wherever you're sitting, you're relaxed, no one's threatening you. But if there were a part of your brain, if there was a light switch in your brain that switched you over to being afraid, whether it's fear for a loved one, fear for your own safety, fear of being hacked. Some of the government scams are really classic around this, where they say the IRS is coming to get you, and you're very scared of the IRS for some reason. And so it flips that switch from the calm and reasoned, here I am sitting in my living room,
Panic.
to, oh my goodness, something is going to happen and I've got to stop this from happening right now. And that level of urgency is not the reasoning side of your brain. It's the side of your brain that is what we refer to as fight or flight, but it's a lot more than fight or flight. It's an urgency that would allow you, running from wolves, to jump off a cliff, right? I wouldn't jump off a cliff normally, but if I'm being chased by wolves, I might jump off that cliff. And so you're already switched into a part of your brain, and it's only in a state of calm and safety can you flip that switch back. And so anybody who's experiencing this in the moment, they can't flip that switch back and say, this is a scam, I got to stop this. They're in that urgent, I have to respond mode. And that's why when a scammer is on the line with someone who's in a bank branch withdrawing the funds, they're saying whatever that hook is that got the person in the first place convinced that the scam, that they need to withdraw their money, they're pressing that button over and over again and not letting the person go back to a calm and reasoning state.
Yes.
And I've had examples, like literally with police departments, like in my own town here, where they're like, I've had a person walk from the Safeway, after buying all the gift cards, into the police department and like, help me not give these codes over to the scammer. Like, I know this is a scam. I bought the gift cards. Please help me stop this. Because they're so afraid of whatever that scammer has told them, whether it's harming a loved one, whether it's we're going to expose your naughty behaviors and share these videos of you, whether it's the IRS says you owe this big debt. I've heard, I mean, the ones that they can be so complex, like your social security number was associated with a crime in this other part of the state, with murder, and all like these elaborate stories that would make no sense to any one of us. But once that button has been pushed and the switch has flipped over to fight, flight, or freeze, then the person is on the hook and they can't get out of it. And it's it's like brain chemistry.
Yeah, and the profile of the victims, I personally know, are all over the place. They can be retired professors of economy, and I know personally a retired professor of economy who gets scammed. They can be brilliant scientists. They can be like retired police officers.
Police
like
chiefs, got that
yes.
one too. Yep.
So it doesn't mean that you are stupid. It's just like you have this vulnerability when you get older and you don't have the right education, this scam and fraud education, this AI education, that kind of like mess you. And again, they are touching the sensitive chord of your life, and it could be like a loved one or someone that like you don't reason with your brain, you reason with your heart, and that's the ugly part of it. It's like they are abusing them in that sense.
I'll say too, I don't know how common you see this, but I know that one of the flavors of this sort of online scam involves technical knowledge that, if you're not a computer savvy person, is hard to understand, where a hacker or a scammer will share screen on your computer and get access to a web page of your bank account, and by editing the code of the web page, they can make it look like oh, you accidentally received $20,000 that wasn't yours, or oh, we actually accidentally took more money than we were. And nothing has happened, but there's a way to change. Like there's all these different little, and that doesn't even require AI. That's sort of a classic, a well-established approach to this. But there's a lot of things that older generations who are just maybe not as versed in all of whatever modern tech, including AI, but there's a lot of things. Just it's easy to be susceptible to that, for sure. But this is an aside. But Donata, are you familiar at all with a YouTuber, a content creator called Kit Boga? Is his username?
Yeah, he came to our National Adult Protective Services conference.
Cool.
I actually did a financial scams panel, and he was like our headliner before. But yeah, that's a story that is a little intense. I wouldn't recommend it to people. But this idea that you can actually go after the scammers.
Yeah, well, his life's work of working with financial companies and institutions and going after people. But chat, if you don't know them, Kit, or him, but he has a whole team. Kit Boga is very interesting. He's a YouTuber, streamer. Now is using AI tools, using like LLM language processing stuff and voice tools to scam scammers and to trick them into thinking that they have found a juicy target who doesn't actually exist, and wasting hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands and thousands of hours of these people's time talking to nobody, or very comically talking to him live on stream, and he just jerks them around. He has fake Google cards that he redeems himself that they think they're about to get thousands of dollars, and he just sends it into the ether, and it's very funny. But I'm glad that he's connected to you guys. His work is very entertaining, but also like it's one of those things where it's surprising how poignant it is, because the whole reason he got into it is his grandmother was scammed and lost huge amounts of money. But it's both entertaining and wildly educational what he does and how he reveals how this stuff works. And so I'm glad you know of him and I've connected with him. But that's
wonderful
really
what he does, and it just kind of poses that question, like if our tech is advancing in a way that it's going to solve all these problems, like how are we not applying it to a problem like this, right? Like how are more people not figuring out a way to go get them back that would actually stop this level of loss? Because if we were all attacking the scammers in the way that would keep them from accessing billions of dollars, I have a feeling it might slow them down a bit. There's another group that I actually met with recently in San Diego, a gal who actually got her PhD in a related field and is now offering it as a solution where businesses can actually like use coding and AI to respond to the hackers. And that's the kind of solution that we all have to kind of put our thinking caps on and say, okay, how can we do this on such a scale that it stops the scammers in their tracks, and how can we invest in that as a society? And I appreciate the example, because I think that really is what it takes. I will just say one note. While I work with a lens of advocating for older adults, some of the statistics are that people of any age fall for the scams just as much. It's the older generation that has the ability to borrow against their house, to withdraw their retirement savings, to access the funds that leads to the higher level of losses. So people falling for scams, that's every age. And actually the second largest group after people over the age of 65 is actually the 18 to 25-year-olds. And one of the things that I like to think about is like, why is that? Well, one of the things that happens with our younger generation is they're not as fluent in like phone calls. Like, and it's just, they haven't spent as many hours on the phone or avoiding these calls. And so it's actually the younger folks too that are also falling for this. And that brain chemistry wise, right? We talk about this reasoning portion of your brain. Well, that reasoning portion of your brain, it's in this part of your physical brain, is actually not fully developed until the age of 25. So then that group is also the most, next to the older generation, the most likely to fall for these, because they're also dealing with a brain that's flipping that switch differently too. So, it really isn't just the age issue. It's the fact that someone has life savings, that they might be accessing because they're in retirement. They might have the ability, they know how to borrow against a house. You know, a 25-year-old wouldn't have a house to borrow against, but a 65-year-old would know how to take out a second mortgage and send that money overseas. Even if crypto is new to them, they know how to withdraw the US dollars and actually send those overseas. And so I think those are some areas where, you know, what other protections we can put in place. You know, the fact that, you know, we talk a little bit about what happens in person versus what happens online. You know, some of the real life fraud that happens in person is people like signing up for like solar panels and like a 30-year lien against their house, where the company's only accepting electronic signature through a tablet, and that person might have never even, you know, seen or read what the terms of that commitment is. And so that's an area where like tech is also, you know, advancing a company's ability to take advantage here in our local communities with, you know, with your real neighbors, and not just from the scammers overseas.
Yeah, and kind of following question, beside the tools of informing and kind of like teaching and advocating for these like tools and information about like these possible scams, what can we do in I know you're not a lawyer, but we have a lawyer kind of with us.
I have a
Um,
law degree. Let's
yeah,
not be
but
too crazy,
still,
but
like, how can we change the law to kind of like, what's the word, the lawyer word of like, you know, when someone is not able to take decisions, so kind of like we
uh
override their decision. What is it?
maybe what
Conservatorship
capacity? Yeah.
Yeah.
or conservatorship?
Conservatorship
Well, it could,
is,
yeah.
yeah, if you, but legal decision-making capacity is the line, and our laws have that line drawn way further in to someone's ability to make decisions for themselves before the courts can come in and remove someone's rights to access their money, for example. And so, in other words, we're talking about this brain switch, right? I could be somebody who is paying my bills on time, getting to and from the grocery store with no problem, taking care of my grandkids, whatever it is, and I have the ability to manage my life, but I could still be giving all my money away. And so the problem is that the line that the legal system has to remove someone's rights is much further down the line than where someone might have the ability and desire to withdraw their funds and give them away to a stranger. And so it isn't really, and again, it's this brain chemistry, right? It can happen to somebody of any age. It isn't really about that. It's not just cognitive decline due to old age. It really is a brain switch that can happen to anyone. You know, certainly if someone is kind of chronically, like I think about this work on a local level, you know, somebody who's giving away their funds, some of the tools that you can put in place is, for example, to move their funds to another account and only give them, you know, $200 a month that they have access to for groceries or whatever. You know, that's if there's a family member nearby, if they're in a trusted relationship with somebody who can manage their money, there's things that you can put in place that don't require a court to remove someone's rights. But if you think about the people that you know and the world that we're in, you know, not everybody has somebody like that. And even if they do, would that individual want someone else managing their money? And I don't know about you, but most of the older people I know, they want to keep their, you know, spending their paying the bills. They want to do that themselves. They don't want someone else doing that for them, and neither would you, right? We value our independence a lot, and especially as we age, we want to hold on to that for as long as possible. So there's a lot of murkiness that when I say there's a public policy mirror, we need to put up and say, okay, at what point and on what occasion do we take someone's rights away? We haven't answered that question as a society yet. And I'm not saying that we should take someone's rights away because they give their money away. Like that also would be extreme. But what can we do in the meantime that can end this harm at least?
Well, and it's tricky too. Again, I am not a lawyer. I have a law degree, but it's the emotional side is it's hard to do that to someone you love, like you're saying. But from the legal perspective too, I think it's a fair question to even ask. is that a decision that we want to give the government the power to decide? Like, the part of the problem, part of the reason this doesn't happen is, how are you going to go to your mom or your dad or your, you know, your elder, someone you look up to, someone who raised you, whatever, and tell them, look, you can't take care of yourself, take away their autonomy? That's really difficult. People don't want to do that. Even if they know they should, people are going to not want to do that. But so then the alternative to that is we make some kind of law where it's like, okay, well, here's a standard, here's a guideline where the government, maybe the police, I don't know, some agency can take some action because someone is clearly demonstrating that they are vulnerable to. Is that like, regardless of what the law says, is that a thing we want to give to the government? Is that a power you want to give to the government? Because even with pure intentions, even with the best of intentions, and even with a perfectly written legislation, which none of them are, it's just, you know, that's just a very important personal thing that is kind of a terrifying thing to hand over. So like, it makes sense to me to be like, well, why aren't there laws, right? Why aren't there laws protecting people? Or why isn't this like the police's duty or someone? But it's just it's a tricky thing to consider that, and contemplate how, in what way you could possibly give that power to a government agency or, you know, an authority of some sort, and trust it and not feel like, what a terrifying way to give away your autonomy as a citizen, right? Because you just have to be put in that category, whether it's accurate or not. If you fall into the category of you lack capacity, you can't make your own decisions, there's nothing you can do about it. They take away your access to your bank account or whatever. Like, it's just a very, at least in the way the American government works, like, that's a thing you don't do. You don't give that sort of power to the government. So it's really difficult to approach, right?
Yeah, that's true. And it reminded me of a movie, Netflix movie, which was like I Care a Lot.
You care a lot. I love that movie.
Yes.
So good.
I learned about conservatorship through that
Yeah.
movie. So what I'm saying is like the government can be the abuser through these crazy situations when someone comes and take conservatorship on you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's literally crazy.
Yeah, so there's two examples I want to jump off of what you were saying there, Bob, and that's certainly the conservatorship system exists. There's a lot of advocates who think that the conservatorship system is corrupt and that it's taking wrongful actions. And so it is already a point of contention. It already is a system that's in place and that people think is perhaps taking advantage too. So that already happens. But the example I wanted to give for your last point, Bob, is really around driving. So driving is kind of the doorway to having this conversation with a family member or a loved one. And if you think about, so driving is something you have to be licensed to do. It's a privilege, not a right. So if it's a privilege, it can be taken away. And if you have wrongdoing, like you get in an accident, there's a police officer there who can take your driver's license away and file that form with the DMV. But if you think about it in terms of a family member, you recognize that, you know, this person is driving, they probably shouldn't be. I think if you did a survey of people you knew, how many of us know somebody who kind of seems like maybe they shouldn't be driving, and how many of us have actually filled out that DMV form? And I'm going to tell you that nobody's filled out the form, and nobody's willing to even report somebody anonymously to the DMV to say, hey, I think you should call, you know, Susan Jones back in for a driver's test because she's not really the best on the road. People aren't even doing that. And that's one step that, you know, gives you so much reason to pause and think about, because someone could, you know, hurt and kill someone else when they're, you know, not driving well. I mean, you're operating this vehicle that, you know, Lord knows what could happen.
It's the most dangerous thing that happens in public.
And yet, are you
people
filling
are
out a
afraid
form
of
saying, I don't think they should drive anymore?
Yeah.
We're not doing that even. So even something that's so obvious that could be so harmful, that's really a privilege, not a right, not taking somebody's money, but just taking away their ability to drive. And I think we as a society haven't faced that question, you know, head on, which kind of shows where we're at with independence. All right.
But I also feel like what keeps standing out to me about all this is how you keep mentioning that all age groups like are fall to these kinds of scams, but it makes sense that like maybe the elderly population they're going to have the worst outcomes because they're, maybe they're like above retirement age, so it's not like they can go back into the workforce and recuperate their life savings and stuff like that. But then it stands out to me like this idea of, even if we did do some sort of figure out a way to enact this sort of thing where we stop someone's right to withdraw their money, so we do that for everyone, because I feel like people are gonna be like, that doesn't sound reasonable if it's a 26-year-old that got scammed. They're 26, like they have their whole life ahead of them. You can't take away their right, but you're okay with doing it for someone who's 76. That feels now like elderly discrimination to me.
It is.
So it sounds like a really hard problem.
It is. It's really easy to say that we, none of us on this call are over the age of 65, but if one of us was, you would be able to say, like, here's all the places where there's age discrimination. And now you're going to add this to the kitty. And I'm going to use one example. I mentioned the DMV. We actually undid a law last year in California that did call out an age limit where people had to come back into the DMV and test to keep their driver's license. And we undid that as a state because it was ageist. And so even though it said you can't just make someone come in and take a test just because they're over the age of 70, we undid that law because it was ageist. And a lot of public policy, because it's being made by people who aren't of that group, like public policy has a bent in it that often has an ageist, issue in it. So, we have to be careful with saying what is the protection that's needed that isn't also causing harm in these ways. And I think that, again, that's where this elder justice, where there is a justice lens to it, because we have to ask these hard questions and then we have to answer them as a society. And when they're hard questions like this, I think people really shy away and say, oh, there's nothing we can do, yet the harm continues. So, but I appreciate you pointing that out, because it's really hard to, I think in this work, you find ageism in the darkest corners of everything we talk about, really.
Speaking about ageism, what are the biggest discrimination against elderly people? Like, where do they see this the most, the ageism, you think?
I think it's rife in our system. I think ageism is kind of the last ism that we haven't, as a society, said is wrong. Like, we haven't fully formulated a way to say, don't say that, it's ageist. My favorite example of that is like on the 100th day of school, when we have schools having kids come to school dressed as old people. I'm like, it's like the most ageist thing I've ever heard of. And I'm like, whose idea was this? Like, like, we're teaching children that, oh, that's grandma and this is what a grandma looks like. I mean, it kind of breaks my heart, because I know that it is ageist, because you're putting you're categorizing a person who's older as other than yourself, right? So we're either young or we're old. So that's kind of the start of it all. But it certainly shows up. I think that in the workplace is probably the most devastating. If people aren't able, if they want to continue working and they are unable to keep their employment, I think that's certainly an area that really has a negative effect. But it's, it's internalized too. It's, around these ability, slowing down, taking time. We're a fast society, we're a young society, we idolize these things. And the fact that we can't just pause and appreciate that, where a person is at in their life, and
and yet everyone who govern us, from president to the Congress, are old people. They're all old people. So I feel like ageism is not a problem for the leaders.
Yeah, well, then when they've gathered the power that keeps them in office, I think that's the thing that we don't have a way of
I think
the power balances.
We should still, like, again, not as ageism, but we should still, like, put an age limit on some things that doesn't make sense and safe, and like kind of like not ban them, but like check, like, a 90 plus someone who's going to the bank and like withdrawing all their retirement. I say no, like, calm down and let's work it out and understand what are you doing and why. Just like this, like questioning, like they are not even allowed to question. Like, you are in a free country, you can go and withdraw all your money. You lose it or not lose it, it's not the responsibility of the bank. I think we should do something. seems just like crazy.
Yeah. I mean, but yet you and I could withdraw $10,000 and go invest in crypto tomorrow. And who's going to tell me I can't do that, even if it keeps me from putting food on the table for my kids? So it's a
Yeah.
tough line. I mean, I get that the line hasn't been drawn. And if you've studied law, then you know that where would you put that law in place and for what purposes? I think driving is an easy example because it's considered a privilege. But we have rights in addition
Yeah,
to.
well, a lot of the concerns that I imagine and that we've talked about that impact the elder community are rights, not privileges, and that in terms of America anyway, that has to be treated in a very particular way, and it's very separate from like if you need a license to do something, if you need a license to practice law, that's not a government license per se, but like these aren't guaranteed rights that no one that are sanctified in the Constitution. No one's allowed to mess with. These are things. Privileges are things that where it's like, yeah, we could look at that. I think it's fair, and maybe not in practice, but like it's fair to say that driving is a privilege, and if you can't earn the privilege by proving that you can do it safely, then that's a fair, public concern sort of thing. But access to your own property, the ability, the autonomy to decide how you dispose of property, what you do with your money, your land, your crew, all this stuff, sort of a fundamental building block of what makes America so free, right? That's the things we laud as the best parts of how free we are and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, and so ageism is like you're saying, it's a topic that's basically unbroached. I think a lot of people probably don't think about it and don't think about things they might do or things in their personal, community, personal circles that are affecting the aged population. But is there, Amin left. Sorry, everybody. The cameras are going to be messed up for a minute.
Maybe her Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's possible.
Cut out.
Is oh no, that made me lose my question. Sorry about ageism. Oh, are there like protections that you that the coalition is fighting for that are appropriate, that respect, people's rights, people's autonomy, but you wish you could get legislators to, put into the books and be able to enforce?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting question. I think that there are certainly some global, I don't think we've cracked the nut either. I don't think we've said, here's the line that needs to be drawn in the sand, but we're taking it issue by issue. And so one of the areas that our coalition is actually trying to address in our state has to do with people of really low means that are aging, and in utilizing public benefits, where they are forced. So say somebody who's living off of Social Security or disability insurance, they end up in a hospital for a healthcare concern, and the hospital's like, we got to discharge you, but if that person doesn't have a place to go or someone to take care of them, there are places in our state where unscrupulous, individuals actually kind of bring folks into their homes and might utilize their public benefits as in return for rent. And so we're actually trying to make the laws a little stronger around people living in what's considered unlicensed care, or someone who is vulnerable living in a landlord-tenant situation where the landlord is utilizing their public benefits not for the benefit of the individual. And so while these are crimes in and of themselves, what we're seeing is examples where, if I need to report, food stamp fraud, then I go to the food stamp people. If I need to report Medi-Cal or, the fraud from my healthcare provider, then I have to go through their, reporting process. If it has to do with support from a caregiver from in-home support services, then I have to report to IHSS. And because they're kind of this elder justice lens, right? Because they're separate entities, no one is really reporting, and that person could be living in a really substandard situation that isn't meeting their care needs, and they don't have anywhere to go. And what little funding or public benefits that they receive are actually being taken by this unscrupulous landlord. this is actually an area that we think nobody's talking about. And so the California Elder Justice Coalition for about 3 years now has been trying to write into legislation to make stronger criminal penalties for this type of behavior. But again, it gets to the issue that this might be taking place, but hospitals play a role, emergency departments play a role. We're not even pressing on those systems to do a better job. We're just trying to make it illegal for a landlord to do that to an older tenant. And so, any of these issues, like that's a very specific solution that we're trying to push for, because again, these are individuals who are kind of the lowest of the low in terms of their access to resources in our community, that they are the ones who are unable to get out and get help for getting out of that situation. And so that's a legislative solution that we've been talking about, trying to build into our penal codes. But again, when we talk with people who are experts in the field, they're like, well, it's already illegal. But if I'm a police officer responding to a call and I don't know that someone's misusing their IHSS, I don't,
Right.
Our police officers aren't trained to know. They know something doesn't feel good about the situation. They see, 8 older people crammed into a 2-bedroom house, but they're like, what am I going to do about that? I don't have a better place to send them. And so, I think we get in these positions where bad things can happen to vulnerable older people, but because we don't have a better solution, or there isn't a place to take someone, then that's when abuse also kind of continues. And we as a society haven't fully faced that question, because it is so expensive to live, at least in our state, but it's expensive to live anywhere at this point. And Social Security doesn't provide, enough for someone to have options to get out of a bad situation. So we've been trying to change our laws in that regard. It's based on some work that was done in Georgia. I think Maryland's also made this a stronger, crime. But that's just one example. Like when we see issues that no one is really addressing, then, as a coalition, we try and come together and say, hey, this is falling through the cracks. What can we do about this problem that we're seeing?
Yeah. Well, and that's I think a problem with all kinds of issues that is overlooked. Is there are often laws in the books. A lot of the stuff that is happening to the elderly community that is, harming them, they're getting scammed. All these things are already illegal. It's not like we need more laws to say that fraud is illegal, but understanding who to especially for someone who is an elder person who, I don't know, maybe their faculties are lower, maybe things are different than they used to be. I don't know what issues, right? But like, how do you even know who to talk to? I don't even know who to talk to sometimes when I'm like, well, I have this issue. Is that a county issue, or is that police? And you might call them and they don't know either. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're very helpful. But you might call the police for an issue and they're like, it's not us.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck. Try somebody else. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a very interesting initiative. I mean, I hope that that's successful, but I
So do
don't
we.
know.
It's been really hard to get people, because one of the, kind of the unintended consequence, right? If we invest in trying to stop this from happening, and then we have more folks who don't have a place to live and that
Right.
are older, like that's a real unintended consequence, that even if we're saying that's illegal what this landlord is doing, well, where do the individuals go? Like, where do we, and I mean, we haven't even talked about, our shelter system, our homelessness system is not designed for aging. Our prison system is not designed for aging. I mean, there's huge systems that have people in them who are aging, and you get some, function and, the inability to bathe oneself, or to, in the prison system, like someone can't climb up to the second bunk, like, and someone's incarcerated in their older years, they don't have access to Medicare. They don't get the health care that they've, potentially paid into like the rest of us, and then they don't have access to it. Like, that's a rights issue. I mean, there's a whole world of what do we do with individuals, in these massive systems incarcerated, and there's one of them. But even the shelter system is not designed, like someone who uses a wheelchair or a walker probably can't go to most shelters. And if that person can't bathe themselves, they absolutely cannot go to a shelter. So where are the places where someone who's unhoused can even go if they need this level of assistance. And what are we doing as the public entities to even, these programs already cost so much money, and we're already always scrambling for the dollars to even fund what services there are that exist. Now, how would we tailor them to meet the aging population as well?
Right.
Which is increased costs, of course.
Well, and so we talked about it a little bit, but if we turn towards AI, I guess, are there any things that you're encountering outside of stuff we've sort of talked about in passing already? Any implementations of AI that you keep seeing come up, or specific issues that it's creating that are new, novel for the issues that you all deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really know. I think it would be an interesting area to kind of brainstorm with you all. Some of the things that I think about when I think about AI is, the learning curve, that it, are people able to understand the tools in front of us and make use of them in a positive sense and protect themselves with, against bad actors who might be using it to harm them. I think that is probably the key area of, what is AI doing to affect my daily life in a way that I need to be informed about. And I think that's probably where a lot of our, if it's a fear that anyone might have, I don't know that we've gotten that answer yet. I think there's a lot of fear around AI, but I don't know that we know how it actually will come into play in daily tasks that someone might be experiencing. So I don't really know. I mean, I think that it's interesting, I'm on more and more calls now where people say, ask Chat GPT. Okay. But I don't think that's harming anybody yet. I think the ability for scammers to use the tool on a massive sense, like we've already had the technology that can target Americans on a massive scale and call us over and over again. And so I don't see the big boogeyman behind it yet. But I also don't know how the technology could be
tools
implemented.
get better. The tools of AI would like clone the voice of your grandson or things like that. There is like an improvement and a realistic part that kind of like is trickier. But yeah.
But the problem's always been there, as I think what Donata is saying. It's like AI is exacerbating the issue, but the issue has been there. Is what I'm hearing.
I think of the deep fakes like when Obama was president. I'm like, that was 15 years ago at this point. Like we had deep fakes. So I mean, that concerns me. I think that the piece where AI can be used to mimic somebody, I think mimicking famous people is this primary concern. But Keanu Reeves reached out to me like 3 years ago to go out with me, and I just don't know. I mean, I think that problem has been there. How sophisticated is it going to get? Because the other thing could happen is that if it gets so inundating, then all of us would then know that it's all BS, right? Like maybe that would be the silver liner. But, is it, I can't point to one technology or another being the cause of it all. It's the humans behind it that are figuring out, how do I use this to harm someone and to steal their money? Like that's who we have to be pointing our fingers at and going, what are the scammers thinking? And how do we get 2 steps ahead of them? Because they're going to come up with a way to use it. Can we be the smarter ones to figure out how to defend against it?
I have another.
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to change the subject. So if you want to.
Oh, I don't know if you'll have. It's a similar question. It's sort of the inverse question. Are there any tools that like you wish existed, or that you've imagined or you've heard about that you think are coming or have come with AI that will help your cause, or is that not really entering into what you guys are doing yet?
Yeah, I mean, it kills me. I'm like, how does the cell phone say that this might be fraud, but doesn't stop the call from coming through?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's like telecoms. Like, what are you guys doing here? Like, this can't be in your best interest that I receive all the calls that are like, I don't know the behind the scenes of why that takes place. How have we not been able to identify when a call is originating from overseas by a spoofed phone number?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we not know that? who's the tech geniuses on this call?
Yeah, well, it is very
mean, I
interesting
think-
that they have the ability to think that, but not to do anything about it, for sure.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to questions of like how much is the average person willing to tolerate like a false positive versus false negatives or something. Like I keep thinking about the situation of someone coming to make a suspicious bank transaction, and like maybe it's true, like all the red flags are there, and maybe most of the time, like the majority of the time, almost all of the time, it is a scam. But what about the one time that it's like not a scam and someone really needs that? I mean, I do, from my perspective, I'm like, to me, it makes sense that make it harder for these phone calls to come through, or like do something, even if it makes it inconvenient for the 1% of the time that it's not a scam. I even think about like two-factor authentication and how it can be so annoying that I have to do the extra step. But you know what? Even though I'm always a little annoyed, I'm like, but you know what? I'd rather this than it being super easy to hack into all my things if I have to be a little bit inconvenienced. And I know in some of these cases, maybe the inconvenience is not little, but I agree with you that there's like it feels like, oh, why let the call come in to begin with? And on the other hand, some of these screening things, it's not like they're 100% accurate. And what if it wasn't a scam call? I've definitely had, I mean, we've probably all seen it where an email gets sent to spam. And we were like, actually, that wasn't spam. That was an email that I was expecting from my insurance company or that I needed.
Yeah.
And so, so it's a good thing it doesn't automatically at least get sent to like deleted. But maybe for phone calls, there could be a spam folder. I don't know.
Or another step, like you're saying, if we've come up with two-factor authentication. So the one point I would love to pose to you all actually is the thing that I discovered in some of this work is that this is not a telephone. And so we're relying on this and having a code that I can then pull up my cell phone and enter a code. There's a point in your, trajectory where this will no longer be a phone with buttons, and that ability to pull up the code, the tech is also going to start to exclude a certain percentage of the population, and the tech, we do lose in aging our ability to adopt new technology and to see this as a phone. So where are we drawing the lines around some of those protections that, whether it's doing things in person? I mean, we can't even, people used to like walk into PG&E and write a check to pay their PG&E bill, their electricity bill, right? Like, what happens when someone can no longer two-factor authenticate their, transactions? Can they walk in anywhere and write a check to somebody to do something? And I don't know that we're not thinking about who tech is leaving out and how do we keep people having access to the things that they need just to function. I mean, paying your electricity bill is one example. So I think that that's also the piece, and how annoying would it be? But there has to be a way to build in, this kind of in real life. Everything can't be on a device, because when you age, that's going to change at some point. If we're fortunate enough to live past 100, there's going to be a time when the devices are like, what is that thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
And two-factor authentication, I mean, so much of this is based on us being tech advanced, like that we have the tech to authenticate on our cell phone with a text message. But at some point, that's not going to work for everybody. And who's talking about that? And why aren't we building in the solutions now when we're building in the technology, rather than we always have to play catch up with, the problems it creates?
Yeah, it's definitely a complicated and hard problem. And it's also brings back the why it's so important when creating solutions, creating new technology, whatever it is that you're doing, creating policy, having this communication with so many different types of stakeholders, not just the people paying the bills, but like different age groups, for example. And something that slightly off topic, but that this made me think of, is that I wanted to ask you is how your coalition engages the elderly population. You're an elder justice coalition. Like, what are some of the ways you concretely get their voice and talk to them, so that when you're creating policy solutions or advocacy things, like when you figure out what you're going to do as a coalition, how is that sourced from the population that you're helping or aiming to help?
So it is a little, you're right that it's an interesting question, and that's something I think about. Like, it's what kind of occurs to me in the middle of the night if I'm not sleeping properly. There are ways that we can certainly reach the people that we are advocating on behalf of. But for a lot of this work, we're interdisciplinary. So we work with people who are providing services to older adults in a variety of formats or from different services. So we have folks who are part of our coalition that are, more from like the academia side that are studying what's happening with older adults. There's people who are, direct on the ground providing services that are identifying when there's like an issue and saying, this is a problem. How come nobody's addressing this? And then they would bring that issue to our coalition. And so a lot of it is, kind of professionals in the field who are saying, nobody's talking about this. Can we do something about it? And that's the type of person that would join and participate in our coalition. We do produce an elder justice blueprint. We've created this kind of map around areas that we know are like the main fields of aging. So like whether it's adult protection or what law enforcement's doing or what the court system is doing, and kind of highlighting where some of these gaps are that we've identified. But I think that, just as this conversation goes, there's certainly areas that we haven't yet identified and that people have yet to bring to our attention. And, so this kind of like a, we're a coalition to help look at the issues that no one else is talking about. And especially when it's interdisciplinary, when it's working across fields, I think that is really the challenges that we're trying to be at the forefront of. But yeah, it really depends. I mean, I have people that email me out of the blue, and then I have, people who've been in this field for decades doing this work.
And speaking about the more like all-state coalition, do you see specific issues in California that are not issues in other states? Because you're a coalition and you are kind of coordinating with other state coalitions. For example, something that I think about it, I'm sure the housing issue in California may not be a housing issue in Nebraska or like some other state where they have enough housing or it's more affordable, and vice versa. Maybe social security in other places or access to healthcare in more rural communities in more rural states are not an issue in like big state with a lot of healthcare providers in like California or things like that. Do you have like these differences, and how do you coordinate and kind of work all together?
Yeah, there's certainly differences in our states. I actually think that California is quite representative of the nation in the sense that we have very, very urban areas that are, oftentimes leading the way with addressing some of the societal issues. And then we have incredibly rural areas. I mean, there's a part of Northern California that a social worker has to drive into Oregon and back into California to get to like where they have people that they're serving. Like they literally can't even drive across the state in the state. They have to leave the state to come back in because that's how rural, our northern border is. That we don't think about when we live in a city. And we do have incredibly rural areas in California. So, I think we have the benefit of saying, we have San Francisco here. They're doing amazing services in this realm. How do we get more people in the rural parts of our country or in our state to have access to that same level of service as someone living in downtown San Francisco, for example? San Diego is a model where they've really bridged, like they've like taken on the crypto crimes, and they've worked across jurisdictions, and they've gotten a whole like regional task force together to address some of these financial crimes. I mean, that's a model that everyone should be following. We look at countries like the UK and Australia, we hear what they're doing to solve some of the same issues that we're seeing. So I think that, in reality, like we're still one planet, and a lot of times these issues are just as big as the communities that they take place in. And
universal problems, yeah,
they are. And so whether it's a rural or urban issue, Sure, that's part of it, but access to healthcare is access to healthcare, and telehealth can only go so far. And then what do you do when someone needs more help than what they have in their community or what they can access, whether it's a 2-hour drive or a 200-mile drive? Like, the issue is the same, and I don't know that there's any place that is affordable. Like, I would love to know where that is, because I think housing is a broad problem everywhere.
To a certain point, like it's a problem, but not as a big problem as here in
Sure,
California.
ours is really expensive, but it's still, if Social Security is $1,100 a month, can I afford an apartment anywhere with Social Security? I mean, I don't know that that's
Doesn't seem like it.
doesn't seem like it, and be able to pay for gas and food. Yeah, I'm pretty sure $1,100 a month doesn't solve anyone's problems.
Yeah. So again, another question kind of targeted to how, like, what is the best state that has the best elderly justice to retire to?
Are you moving there, amen? It was like, tell me where to go.
See where is safe, and I will be protected. I would be empowered. I would be.
The
an
best
old
place for you
lady.
to age is where your people are at. So you've got
That's
connections, you've got people who check up on you, you've got places to go during the day to have human interaction, and you know where your food is coming from, and you've got a roof over your head. That's the best place for you to age. And if that's in the heart of Berkeley and you've got your people there and you have your own community, I love hearing about the models, where they, get a bunch of folks together and they have like a preschool and they have like the older adults living together and people with dementia, and they're all together in a village. Like, that dream of a real village, bringing the village back, and doing it
So you think like
intentionally, I think
community
is
the
the
key?
hope. Yeah, because you
Yeah.
need people of all ages, and we need to be there for one another at any age. I mean, we need it when we're raising our kids, and we need it when when we're, if we're experiencing cognitive decline. But yeah, it's wherever your people are at, and keep them close, and yeah, go out and help somebody out. And
Yeah, there's no perfect state or at least
well,
county.
it's almost like we've forgotten collectively that the village model is what humans are designed for. We're designed to be multiple ages, multiple types of people there, having meals together, and that's the cure for all this isolation stuff, right? The flip of the switch happens because we're afraid, we're alone, we're not talking to people. When we are talking to people, then we're protecting against that vulnerability in ways that you can't even, that's the solution, is always connectedness and being human.
And do you have like social workers also that work with you that kind of like be the actors in this kind of like implementing solution and things like that?
Yeah, a lot of our we certainly draw a lot of, like, we have a, we have the ability to connect with any of our social work like entities. So Adult Protective Services is probably the biggest, across the state, where there's an APS in every community, and they have,
I never heard about APS. I always heard like children protective service, but I've never heard that there is an adult protective. So who can signal something or like tell if someone is abused? Like you have to call the adult abuse protective services. Like how does it work?
Yeah, so if you had a neighbor you were worried about, you could call Adult Protective Services and say,
It's
hey,
a national thing, or it's only like it's everywhere
it's
in
by
all states?
county. In our state, it's by county. In other states, it's a state entity.
I see.
So it depends. But yeah, in California, it's by county. And there is a number to call. There is effort on the state level to have a unified statewide number that people could call and get this information. But again, the service providers, there's a different number for everybody. But yeah, if you were a community member concerned, obviously, if you think it's actual abuse that's taking place, calling your police department and saying, here, I'm really concerned, and I need you to do a welfare check on somebody that hasn't, there's my next door neighbor, she comes out and checks her mail every morning at 10 a.m., but I haven't seen her for 5 days. Can you do a welfare check? A police officer will knock on the door and make contact with someone. But as far as Adult Protective Services go, unlike with children, whom we take, we have, society will act on behalf of a child. We have, it's like, we take that role. With elders, we don't. And so Adult Protective Services is a voluntary, service that someone would knock on the door and say, hey, I'm a social worker. Your neighbor said you hadn't left your house in 5 days. Can I talk to you? And if that person says no, then the answer is no. And that social worker would go on with their next case. So it is a different world too than, whereas the intervening that you imagine for a child who might be being harmed, there's more interventions that take place with children than there are for elders. No one's coming to take grandma and lock her up in a nursing home. And we wouldn't want that, but it's not the same.
The other question that kind of like, the other thing that kind of shocks me is the increase in the cost of homes, like care, professional home. How do we call them?
Like group care
Like
homes
in-home?
or like assisted living type homes or something?
All of them.
Yeah, there's
all of them
different
cost
levels.
an arm and a leg. All of them together. And I ask
Yeah.
always myself, like, how, like, what should we do either about that? Like, is it like it should be, you think it should be government run, so it's kind of keep decreasing? But I'm sure like even the government run, I mean, look at the healthcare, it's still keeping up and up and up. So
Yeah.
how people afford when these like cares, home cares, or like whatever they have to do when they go old? If you don't have the
They
system,
don't.
or if all your people are
Yeah.
like out of state, or like your friends are all dead or something, like how do
Yeah.
we do
Yeah.
that?
There is no public system for long-term care. The medical model, so people think that a nursing home,
Yeah.
so if I end up in the hospital and I'm 90 years old and I break my hip and I need to go to a nursing home, Medicare is only going to pay for 20 days. And then you'd have to find a place that accepts Medi-Cal or Medicaid. And that reimbursement is much lower than what the homes need. And so they actually end up often discharging people. And so even in the system that is designed to allow some access, many people do get tossed out of that system too, for whatever reasons. And so there is no system. Back in the day, there was the ability to buy like long-term care insurance that would cover maybe 2 years of a stay. But even those policies are, they either don't exist or people, you can't sign up for new ones. So I know that in some states, I think Oregon has talked about having kind of like employment tax, like we have like unemployment insurance, that there would be something like that. But I think the cost of what that would put on,
Isn't it social security tax for that? Like this is what it was
well, think
designed.
of it, if it costs in my community, the lowest cost long-term care is more than $5,000 a month. And if I retire at 65 and live to 105 for 40 years, is someone paying $5,000 a month starting for me to live?
Crazy.
That the dollars just aren't there. Like it just doesn't. I don't think any solution that would cover everyone is anyone could afford. And so that's a lot of the reason why we're in the challenge that we're in, is that you try and press on one system, Medi-Cal or Medicaid, to pay for somebody who needs this level of care. And then there's we have a program called the it's called PACE. It's the program for where it basically merges healthcare and all of the public provider systems into one, and tries to keep people living safely at home, and then they get their medical care from this model. And even that, I think, is used on a fraction of the basis. And you throw in something like dementia, and we really don't have. I mean, those facilities cost like upwards of $12,000 a month if you need memory care.
It's crazy.
So it's a lot of money.
I have a
I
question.
don't think there's a solution for that. Yeah, it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and it also sounds like a lot of it, a lot of the conversations we've had today are like about how there needs to be a conversation almost like at the society level, or like a change in the way we do society. And there's also things that the government can step in and do. There's like policy kind of solutions, all these types of things. At the individual level, someone who's sitting here maybe listening to all this, feeling like it's so bleak. And what can I do? I'm not actually a lawmaker. Do you have any thoughts on like what is the average person who is not necessarily in a giant position of power, who might just be listening on the stream? What can we like? What should we be thinking about and doing to support these more these solutions that kind of they have to happen more than just the individual level. We're not going to fix it at the individual level. There are clear systemic issues, but what can we do to support like your efforts, or just in general, what should we be doing if this is something that we think like, oh, I would love to help, whether that's, you know, something like donating or voting or paying attention to if when elderly justice type policy is being put on the ballot. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and it's, you know, it's kind of simplistic. I do have a rose-colored lens. That's how I'm able to work in such a challenging field and still have hope. The world is getting better. But I do think that the biggest lens, you know, it kind of gets back to that conversation we had around ageism, which is, you know, every policy, every vote that you make, there's a lens that you would look at, like, what would this look like from an aging lens? So whether it's talking about, you know, how do we stop homelessness? Well, what does homelessness look like for someone aging? Like that lens is so easy to think that it doesn't affect me until I'm in it. But, you know, kind of like we've been saying, if we're fortunate enough to age, it's going to affect all of us. And that's a good thing. Like, it's a great thing that if we all get to become, you know, older citizens in our country. Well, let's think about now what we would want to see, you know, happening so that we're supported in that as we age. And I think that all the public policy perspectives, you know, it when it's election season, you know, how many of the people we're electing even talk about aging? It's very few. When we're passing legislation, you know, is it age inclusive? When we're talking about, you know, investing in childhood education, you know, it's like, where's the lens that has this piece to it as well? And I think that it's just, the sooner we start talking about it, like on all, you know, across the age spectrum, I think then we will come up with more solutions. But right now it still kind of feels like, oh, that's in the distant future, and I'm not going to think about that because I don't want to, or I don't want to think about what I'm going to be like when I get old. Like, that's not helping anybody. It's the ostrich method, doesn't really work for anyone. So I think we just have to keep talking about it and really think about, you know, how this looks from all the vantage points. And you know, I try and bring it into whatever conversations I have with friends and family. But I think that we have to do it on a policy level for sure. So it's challenging. I mean, but I think that asking the question and then thinking about where you see folks in your life that, you know,
keep them close. They may be in charge of you
with more connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have more questions in the chat, Bob?
Chat's kind of having their own discussion, but they're not really asking questions for us to address. If you do have any questions, chat, go ahead and share them. We would love to talk about that. But yeah, they're discussing. I mean, they're kind of just discussing what we're discussing their takes on what's happening and how AI isn't really creating new problems. It's just sort of amplifying the old problems. It's all, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just the same stuff being done in a new way or in a more complicated way. But chat. There's one of those days where chat's just kind of keeping to themselves. I guess I'm curious. This is not as much about your expertise, but it's kind of a question we always touch on with guests. Do you have a favorite, Donata? Do you have a favorite like portrayal of AI in media, or I don't know, like a movie or a TV show? Do you enjoy movies? Do you have anything that springs to mind for that?
That has to do with AI?
I mean, it could be, you know, vaguely AI or computers, but just curious. I'm always curious what people's perspective is, because obviously one of the things we deal with is like people have come from wildly different places on terms of what they think AI is, what that means to them, how they think it affects them, ways they might not understand it's affecting them. And you know, I'm not even one of our scientists. Our researchers are working in this stuff in the weeds, doing the hard research. But even for me, I feel like I'm I'm pretty well versed, and probably more versed than an average person in like what is out there, what AI
And
is, what it's doing. But so
yeah,
I'm
and
curious, like what you think, and this is one of the questions that we have to just be like, do you have a conception of, you know, an AI or a media that you like that represents it, or do you not even think about that? Is that not something that you?
and I would add a sub question to what Bob said. And would you see the threat of AI to what you do, your work, your like career, everything? Would you see a bunch of AI bots doing your job in the future and taking care of
No,
elderly?
I think it could, all of this, as you're asking me this question, the only other thing that I reflect on is the class that I actually teach at a university nearby is legal and ethical issues in aging and social services. I teach a class at San Francisco State, and I spend the semester talking with students about what these ethical lines are when it comes to aging. And the only thing that I would say is I think that it's a human that comes to terms with where we stand ethically on a certain issue, or where we would draw the lines for any of the challenges that we've discussed today. Where do you take someone's rights away, and what would we be comfortable with as a society, drawing some of these lines in the sand. And I don't know how, like, even if you inputted every ethical theory on this planet that's ever been discussed by a human, I don't think, I mean, call me, again, rose colored. I think that a human has to decide what's right or wrong. I don't think a machine can, but that's just what I think about. Like, I think about all these choices that we make when we talk about how we would want a loved one, accessing services, or how we want ourselves to age independently. Those are personal questions. There is no right or wrong answer. It's, kind of a nuanced sense that comes from our humanity. So I don't see AI. I don't know what AI would look like with a justice lens, but it feels very human to me to say, here's what we need to do to improve aging, and here's what I would want when I'm aging. It feels very human to me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a very, I mean, honestly, that's an important consideration. It's easy, someone who's not versed, who just for the first time is talking to, a chatbot or whatever. It's easy to be like, oh, this is basically a person, right? It feels maybe like you're talking to a human. I think if you do it for long enough, it doesn't feel like that, but it's easy to, and I think a lot of people who are leading in the industry kind of want that to be the perception, right? They want it to be in charge of things. They want it to be implemented in businesses. This is their prerogative. It should just run everything, which is kind of a dystopian sci-fi movie script. But also, like, I do think it would be, I don't think it'd be crazy if someone, who just learned about this technology and was interacting, it was like, yeah, well, why wouldn't that make laws? That makes sense. It seems reasonable. Seems like it understands. But cannot stress enough, you are exactly right. There's no humanity in it, right? There's an important, even crucial, I would say, part of like lawmaking and managing society is all the considerations have to have, legal considerations. There are laws, there are rules about how things have to work in your certain government or your certain jurisdiction, but there has to be humanity in it too. It doesn't really matter what a law is or what it does if it's not taking into consideration the human impact. And the reason it's dystopian to imagine a world where everything's run by AI is because it's not really capable of that. It doesn't understand that. It may understand parts of, like, oh, well, this is something humans do a lot, so this must be a pretty human thing to care about, but it doesn't understand why we might care about that or the point of that. And that's especially in what you do, a crucial thing, right? I think it's interesting how easy it is to just feel about the issues, the elder justice issues we've been talking about, to just feel like, it doesn't really apply to me, so I'm just not going to worry about it. I think that's kind of where a lot of people land on it, is what it seems like. But to me, that's just a really crazy take. How could you possibly think it doesn't apply to you, unless you don't plan on getting very old? I think all of us kind of need to be concerned with how is that going to apply to me, because it definitely is. But yeah, so that's interesting. So I think it's safe to say then you don't really use AI tools. The coalition is not moved to a fully AI platform where all your business stuff is. That doesn't sound like
No, we do a lot of
what
talking.
the direction you've taken.
No, even when we can't come up with something to say more succinctly, we entered into AI and then we're like, yeah, we could say it better. So I think the piece of it that really gets to me is, I'm also fortunate enough to be a long-term care ombudsman, which is a person who visits people living in long-term care who don't have someone visiting them regularly. And I think of the example, some of the training that we received is like, how do you ask somebody their opinion when they're not verbal? And you can ask somebody what their preference is, even if they can't say yes or no. And that sure is one area where I think AI will never will never be able to ask a human, what's your preference around your care, and have the answer, come to them. Like we communicate as, animals, as humans, even when we don't have the words to express, or when we're in extreme advanced dementia, there's still a preference there. And even if we don't know what day of the week it is, we sure know what we like to eat for lunch, or what time we like to drink coffee at. And those are areas where I don't think AI would have a chance of bringing that humanity into our day-to-day life, even if we're relying upon it for other, functions.
Sure.
Well, that sounded like a very concluding.
No, I mean, I just think that's spot on. I think there's a lot of talk in the news and in the people who are sort of leading the companies that are leading the push for AI, about how it thinks, and how it has memory in it, and it thinks, and it's rational, and it's important to understand the difference between something appearing that way, and something actually thinking and understanding humans, and emotions, and nonverbal cues, and all of the complications of human communication. So I think you're just dead on correct on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder to get out and, take a walk in your neighborhood and say hello to somebody, and you'll get more out of that interaction than, talking with any, bot would provide you, and it would, give you that context and rooted in community. And I think that is what, at least I hope for all of us with aging, is that we have that community, that we stay connected, and that's where you're going to find what you need.
So this is kind of circling back, but we do have a question from chat. Echo 611 asks, so we talked about the issues, the concerns around the government or government authorities being able to take your autonomy in terms of like protections for elder or other communities. And they asked, well, would it make sense then for doctors to make the call? And I would extend that to say, is there a group of professionals, or I don't know, other people that you or that the coalition thinks are more appropriate to make that sort of call? Or does that just run into other issues of its
doctors
own?
and psychologists are identified in our state law as the ones who can determine capacity. And so in the sense of the legal construct, and I only know California is set up, but basically, if I think someone needs help with their decision making, I can go to the doctor and say, hey, can you do an evaluation? And can you write that evaluation up in something that I can then, with an attorney's help, file in a court of law, and ask to take over? That's that conservatorship process that Eman mentioned a bit ago. So doctors and psychologists are identified in the law as being the ones who can determine capacity. And then a judge has to actually rule on it and say that what the doctor wrote up kind of warrants someone's rights being taken away. And that is the process that exists. However, in real life, there are many people, especially as they age, that maybe don't go to doctors anymore. So I jokingly say, my mom always said, well, if I don't go to the doctor, then they're not going to tell me what's wrong with me.
Right.
I'm like, true. You just don't go. Okay. So when that happens after, 5, 10, 20 years of not seeing a doctor, that doctor isn't going to know what that person used to be like. And we all have our funny quirks and our, weird ways of being as humans. they're not going to know whether or not I'm going down the path of cognitive decline necessarily. And then there's also the factor that cognitive decline isn't an even slope. It actually is up and down. So some days I could be having a great day, and other days I don't know what time it is, and that's always a factor too. So I think that the medical professionals who do work in the geriatric field understand these complexities, but not every one of us have access to a professional who actually knows this side of things that well. Like I think it's something like, I forget what the statistics are, but this is one area for public policy advocacy, is that I think it's like, oh gosh, what is it? I think it's like 1 in 10,000 people have access to like a geriatric trained physician in our country. Like the numbers are just staggering because so few medical professionals are actually trained in this area too. So that's an area where we really need to be promoting more knowledge and familiarity. But then this fundamental question of, do we even go to the doctor in the first place? But yeah, it is the place where you could start. If you really are trying to help someone. But I've certainly seen examples where you can't even get someone to go to the doctor, let alone to consent to being evaluated for capacity. Like, if I don't want you taking my rights away, I'm going to give you a hard time when you try and take me to that doctor.
And that framework doesn't even work in the context of like the scams we were talking about, the financial scams, because these are I mean, I don't know if these happen over the span of multiple days, maybe they do, but I'm thinking like you're on a phone call at the bank or something, like this process of getting an evaluation from a psychologist or a doctor and then getting it into court, like the time frame is a mismatch. So I feel like that question of when do we say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you withdraw your money, is kind of a different question, like a autonomy right question than in general cognitive decline. I feel like it's slightly different too, because we've talked about how actually falling for these scams is not necessarily have anything to do with cognitive decline. So it's just a really hard judgment call to make.
Well, and I will add too, again, from like a legal perspective, that it would seem like, okay, well, a doctor is involved, they're making assessment, even if you ignore the issue that Donata pointed out, it still lands on, okay, and then a judge has to rule, and the judge decides. That's not any different from, I mean, it's mechanically different, but in terms of the government taking a right away from a person, it runs into that same issue, I think, because the courts, I think everyone maybe has hopes or likes to believe that the courts are the reasonable branch, that they will be, they will be smart and fair. But I think if you pay attention to the national discourse, you could see pretty easily courts at all levels, criminal courts, civil courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court, can just do things that don't make any sense, humanity or not. So it walks right into that same issue, I think, of is that an institution that you trust to take away your rights? Obviously, they have the authority to take your rights away in certain instances, for criminal cases or what have you. But like, do you want them not arbitrarily, but what would be the word? Sort of their own accord, taking your rights in these sort of cases? I don't know. I think people might have the same sort of concern about that.
The other piece, the other side of this, when I talked about unintended consequences, is even if the court is willing to take and needs to take someone's rights away, who do you give those rights to?
Right.
And so we also have a system that we don't have anyone in place that can then be the stewards of all of this, just 9% of the population that's, going to have Alzheimer's. Even if we identified a group of 9% of us that have a disease, that are diagnosed, who's stewarding those people, those resources, and in what lens? So, it also creates the whole other can of worms of what happens on the other end of that too, even if we had the mechanism in place to take someone's rights away. So this is why, the elder justice, kind of mindset of thinking of having a very broad way of looking at with this lens is important for us. And I think that if we were all thinking these ways, we would hopefully be creating better public policy and strengthening the systems that we do have to allow for this kind of elder justice, way of doing things. It's a challenging question for sure. But yeah, I think you mentioned if there's any way, I mean, we certainly have, we're a nonprofit, we're a small nonprofit. There are ways that people can get involved in this work. We have a newsletter that I send out at least every month. And whenever there's issues that action can be taken, I try and not only send out the e-newsletters when there's something that we can take action on. And everything from weighing in on, federal rule changes to, showing up somewhere in your community to say that we care about this issue. I mean, you'll start to see this issue more and more when you have kind of the lens open to see how much this field of aging we really need to be doing more to talk about what issues we're going to be facing.
Well, and this is pretty similar, but Kim Tana in chat just asked, do you have resources that you would point people towards to help their family members or someone elder person in their life that they might feel like needs a resource or needs some help? Is it on your website or?
Yeah, it's going to be different. So people can go to our website is elderjusticecal, CAL, like California.org. You're welcome to reach out that way. It's going to be different. So in California, you can go to our Department of Aging. So I think every state will probably have a Department of Aging where usually you'll see the statewide resources and then it'll point you back to what's in your community, like whether it's by your zip code or by county. So if you had questions in California, we're working to produce this aging and disability resource hub. So there's supposed to be a number that you can call and you can find out who it is you can talk to on a local level here in California. But I think it depends on what state you're in and trying to navigate it can be challenging. But certainly if people want to reach out through our website, there is a form and, you could say like contact us and say, hey, I'm, here's what's going on with someone I care about. Where would you start? And I could certainly give you some advice about how I'd go about doing that. But unfortunately, that's a big part of the aging field is it depends on what you need help for is who you would call. So I think we're trying to centralize it, but it's still depends on what you need help around and then where you're at and to see what resources are available there. But we do have, the federal government, we have the Older Americans Act. A lot of the programs and services are available everywhere in our country. So there's a way to find them if you know what you're looking for. So.
Kim Tana says thank you.
I hope that, it's good
Nice.
to reach out and just think that if someone can help, then, you got to ask and reach out. The first step.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time. We are sort of coming up to the end of our scheduled time. Is there anything, I feel like we've been talking about it a lot all over the place, but is there anything specific that you want to plug for people to get involved with or to check out or, I don't know, anything at all you'd like to throw out for people?
Remote.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I gave my website, so you're welcome to come check out the Elder Justice or look for Elder Justice in your own community and see ways that you can get involved. And we have a lot of people talking about this issue once you get cued in, so I hope that you find a way to be part of the solutions.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Donata, for sharing your time with us. If you have to head out, that is totally fine, but I think we're going to move on to the part of the stream chat where we encourage you to follow our other channels. If you would go ahead and just follow the raid that I'm about to do from my main channel over to the Real Good channel on Twitch, or if you're watching on any of their other platforms, if you would be willing to check out twitch.tv/realgoodai. Yeah, I said it right. I thought I spelled it wrong for some reason. Twitch.tv/realgoodai. We'd really appreciate it. You'd also follow us on any of the socials. We have a Instagram, we have a TikTok, we post on YouTube. We'd love for you to follow. Also, if you could check out our website, there's a ton of great stuff. Oh, don't play my voice back to me, computer. We're right now in the middle of the writing competition that we have been promoting and hosting. Stories have been submitted, and right now we're looking for help with judging. So if you like reading, if you're interested in reading speculative AI horror from people who submitted to our competition, we could really use your help. There's a form where you can apply to be a judge. It does have to be approved, so it's not just like you can go and find the stories immediately. But you can apply, and barring any conflicts of interest or any other issues, you can read as many stories as you'd like, and help us pick the ones that are going to be the winners for that competition. It's really, I have read some of them. I'm an inside man, so I have a little bit of an advantage, and it's really fun. I've read some really well written stories. I've read stories about a wide range of different like issues with AI that they're sort of addressing. They're about. I can recommend it. It's very fun, especially if you like reading. The stories are 7 to like 10,000 words, so it's like 20 pages. It's like a quick read for someone who reads, novels and long form stuff. So very fun. Also, chat, make sure you come next week on July 30th, next Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Cody, our summer student, whose last day technically is actually tomorrow, but he will be joining us on stream next week. I think he's going to talk about the work that he's done over the summer. It's going to be kind of like a farewell stream. Cody did excellent work for us this summer, and then we'll be going back to school because summer's over already, apparently. It doesn't feel like it should be, but come next week on July 30th, usual time, usual place, and you get to hear some interesting discussion of scientific research, and we'll say goodbye to Cody, which will be bittersweet, but he's got to go finish his degree. And I think that's it, chat. Make sure you check out all the stuff that I said, and then we're going to raid into the Real Good Regiment. Today, the Real Good Regiment is, I believe, playing, what's that thing called? Nope. What's that game they play? Ooh. Helldivers. Man, I just absolutely... All right, they're playing Helldivers. If you want to go watch them, they play Helldivers. They are a group of volunteers who originally started out as volunteers. They just streamed to raise money during our fundraising event last year, and they turned this into a regular thing. The Real Good Regiment streams every Thursday. They have started having guests on. They do play other games, even though Helldivers is kind of their bread and butter. But fun stream, fun group of people. You should check it out. And I am gonna type on the wrong keyboard and hopefully didn't delete anything important on my Minecraft. The Keith clan. Why you got underscores? There you go. We're gonna raid over to Keith clan. So go say what's up to the Real Good Regiment. That's gonna be it for the rest of us today. So thank you for hanging out and engaging with what was a really interesting conversation. I feel like I need to go do something. Like I need to go do something positive. But there's a lot of difficult issues in the world, so anyway, go say what's up to chat. We are out of here. Thanks, Maylene and MN, for leading the conversation today too. I think it went really well, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, chat.